Three of the largest airlines in the Americas filed for bankruptcy within 7 weeks of each other. A fourth airline, far smaller than any of them, stopped flying entirely in the same crisis. Not most of its flights, but every single one. Its fleet sat parked for 5 straight months, and yet it never filed for anything. That same airline now posts operating margins that beat carriers many times its size, year after year, with one of the strongest balance sheets in the industry. And the strangest part of the story is that the decision that saved it was made 40 years before the pandemic ever existed, by people who had no idea a pandemic was coming. This is the story of Copa Airlines, the flag carrier of Panama, a country of around 4.5 million people. So how exactly did the smallest player turn into the strongest? To answer that, we have to go back to 1944, to a small office in Panama City, where the whole story begins with an American partner that would eventually walk away. On June 21st of 1944, a group of Panamanian investors sat down with executives from Pan American World Airways and signed the documents to create a new company, Compañía Panameña de Aviación, COPA for short. Pan Am took a 32% stake and brought the technical knowledge. The Panamanians brought the capital and the country. It took 3 more years before the airline actually flew. On August 15th of 1947, COPA lifted off for the first time, operating 3 Douglas C-47 aircraft on domestic routes inside Panama. 3 planes, 3 cities, a flag carrier in name only, working a route map that would fit on a postcard. For almost 2 decades, that is all that COPA was, a small domestic airline in a small country, propped up by an American partner. The first international flight did not happen until the 1960s, when COPA added 3 weekly services to San Jose and Costa Rica using a tiny mix of Avro 748s and Lockheed Electra 188s. Kingston in Jamaica followed, then Cartagena and Barranquilla in Colombia. By the end of that decade, COPA had finally crossed the border, but only just. Its world still ended a couple of hours from home. The first turning point came in 1971. Pan Am, dealing with its own problems and pulling capital out of regional partners across Latin America, sold its stake in COPA to a group of Panamanian investors. For the first time, the airline was wholly Panamanian owned. No foreign safety net, no big brother in New York covering the gaps. If COPA was going to survive, the people in Panama City would have to figure it out themselves. And almost immediately, they ran into trouble. By the end of the 1970s, a domestic rival called Air Panama was eating into the routes COPA had spent 30 years building. The math at home was getting worse every year. Panama is a small country. 2 domestic airlines fighting over the same handful of cities is a slow death for both of them. COPA's leadership sat down to make a choice: shrink and die quietly, or do something. Almost nobody in aviation would advise. They went for the second option. In 1980, COPA walked away from the domestic market entirely. Not reduced, not restructured, gone. The airline that had been founded to fly Panamanians around Panama announced it would no longer fly Panamanians around Panama. Every aircraft, every crew, every dollar of capital would now be aimed outward. The same year, COPA took delivery of its first jet aircraft, a Boeing 737-100. The Propeller era ended, the international era began, and the country itself, not the passengers, became the product. At first glance, everybody thought that idea was ridiculous. Panama's population was smaller than many American cities. Nobody looked at a map and thought, this is where one of the most profitable airlines on Earth should be born. But COPA's leadership had noticed something the rest of the region had not. Panama sits at one of the most useful pieces of geography anywhere on the planet. North America above, South America below, the Caribbean beside it. A narrow strip of land that connects everything. From Panama City, a single Boeing 737 could reach almost every major city in North, Central, and South America without ever needing a wide body. That unlocked a kind of math nobody else in the region could do. Two mid-sized cities on opposite ends of the Americas might never have enough demand to fill a direct flight between them. Run them both through Panama City, and the passengers from a dozen of those thin routes meet in one place, get sorted, and continue on. A traveler from Guatemala connects to Buenos Aires. A traveler from Quito connects to Orlando. A traveler from San Jose connects to Santiago, all through one airport. But there was a problem. In 1980, the airport was not ready. Panama City's main field had limited capacity and limited reputation. So through the 80s, Copa expanded slowly. Flights to Miami, to San Juan, and to Santo Domingo. Building experience, building credibility, building a route book. The real Copa Airlines, the airline that exists today, was born in 1992. That year, the airline moved its operations to Tocumen International Airport on the edge of Panama City, and shortly afterward branded the entire concept as the hub of the Americas. And then the expansion began for real. Between 1992 and 1997, Copa launched flights to Caracas, Mexico City, Santiago, Cali, Bogota, Quito, Guayaquil, Lima, Buenos Aires, and Havana. 10 major Latin American capitals in 5 years. The route map went from regional to continental. But it was still a small airline operating an aging fleet, and to get to the next level, it needed help. Help arrived in 1998 when Continental Airlines of Houston took a major equity stake in Copa, eventually rising to 49%. The deal changed everything. Copa got access to Continental's operational systems, its scheduling discipline, its training programs, its purchasing power. Delivery was redesigned to look almost identical to Continental's. The fleet was modernized aggressively, with new Boeing 737 next-generation aircraft replacing the old jets. For the first time, the airline started to look and feel like a major international carrier. And here is something that does not get talked about enough, well, at least in my personal, humble opinion. The years under Continental's wing were a kind of management apprenticeship. Pedro Heilbronn, who had taken over as chief executive in 1988 at the age of just 30, spent the late 90s and early 2000s quietly absorbing how a serious airline runs itself. The discipline that would later astonish the industry was learned in this period. The obsession with on-time performance, the fleet commonality, the refusal to expand without economic logic. None of it was invented by Copa. Most of it was learned from Houston. By 2005, Copa was ready to step out on its own. In April of that year, the airline acquired 99.8% of Aeromexico, a Colombian carrier with a fleet of MD-80s and DC-9s and a domestic network across 12 cities for roughly $23.4 million. It was Copa's first acquisition. The Colombian operation would later be rebranded Copa Airlines Colombia. 8 months later, in December of 2005, Copa Holdings launched its initial public offering on the New York Stock Exchange. The ticker was, and still is, CPA. A small airline from a small country was now a publicly traded company answering to American investors. The discipline that had been learned under Continental was now demanded by the market. The years that followed were a steady climb. New routes, new aircraft. The first Embraer 190 joined the fleet, making Copa the first Latin American operator of the type. The frequent flyer program was rebuilt, and in June 2012, Copa formally joined Star Alliance, the largest global airline alliance, alongside United. New service to Las Vegas, Curacao, Recife, and Iquitos followed. The airline had gone from being a regional flag carrier to a fully integrated member of the global aviation network in roughly 30 years. And then in April of 2015, Copa placed a single order that would define the rest of its story. 61 Boeing 737 MAX aircraft plus 10 options that were later exercised. A deal worth more than $6.5 billion at list prices. The airline was betting its entire future on one airframe family from one manufacturer. No Airbus, no wide bodies, nothing else. The same aircraft type Copa had been flying since 1980 would carry the airline into the next generation. That bet looked ordinary in 2015, but by 2020, it looked like genius. because in the spring of 2020, Pedro Heilbronn found himself sitting in one of the worst positions in aviation. Panama moved fast against the pandemic, very fast. On March 23rd of 2020, international travel slammed into a wall. And within days, every Copa aircraft was parked on the ramp at Tocumen. The airport went quiet, the schedules disappeared, the passengers vanished. For nearly 5 months, Copa's entire network was effectively frozen. And that should have terrified anyone holding the stock. Because unlike most airlines on Earth, Copa had no safety net. Delta had a huge domestic market to fall back on. American had one, United had one. Even most carriers in Latin America could keep a few wheels turning on domestic routes. Copa had no domestic operation at all. It had not had one since 1980. The single decision that built the airline was now the decision that exposed it. Now look at what was happening around them. On May 10th of 2020, Avianca, one of the oldest airlines in the world, filed for bankruptcy protection in a New York court. 16 days later, LATAM, the biggest airline in South America, did the same thing. Before the end of June, Mexico's flag carrier, Aeromexico, had joined them. 3 of the largest airlines in the Americas went into Chapter 11 within 7 weeks. And the airline that looked the most exposed of all simply stayed out of court. No bankruptcy, no restructuring, no emergency rescue. Heilbronn waited. He lived off the cash on his own balance sheet. The cushion Copa had spent years stacking up. When Panama finally cracked the door open in August of 2020, the airline restarted one route at a time, 11 destinations, then more. By the end of the following year, it had won back roughly 80% of its traffic. So what did Heilbronn know that the chief executives of 3 giant airlines did not? Simple answer, he knew exactly what was sitting in his own hangar. Walk through a Copa operation, and the answer hits you immediately. Almost every aircraft looks the same. The airline built itself around the Boeing 737 family and almost nothing else. The Embraer 190 fleet, the only exception in modern times, was sold off to Australia's Alliance Airlines, starting in 2020. Back to one type, one pilot pipeline, one maintenance system, one spare parts inventory, one set of procedures. That sounds boring, but at the same time, it is also incredibly powerful because complexity is expensive in this industry. Every new aircraft type creates additional training requirements, additional maintenance overhead, additional scheduling problems, additional risk. Most airlines accumulate those complications over decades. Copa keeps stripping them out. The result is that Copa runs some of the lowest unit costs of any full-service airline on the planet. Operating costs for every seat it flies a mile sits at around 8.6 cents. Strip out fuel, and that figure drops to roughly 5.8. Those are numbers a budget carrier would brag about, with the only major difference being Copa is not a budget carrier. It sells business class. It is a full member of Star Alliance. And it still operates with low-cost economics underneath. Efficiency does something even more valuable than save money, though. It creates resilience. Years before the pandemic, Copa was already building one of the strongest balance sheets in aviation. It resisted the trap that catches so many airlines. Cheap debt, expansion for the sake of expansion, growth without discipline. Instead, it piled up cash, lots of it. Set Copa next to the airlines that filed, and the picture becomes almost embarrassing. LATAM, Avianca, and Aeromexico all spent years rebuilding themselves inside Chapter 11, shedding debt, shrinking fleets, reorganizing under court supervision. They came out smaller, they came out wounded. In 2025, the supposedly fragile carrier in Panama posted a net profit of $671.6 million on revenue of roughly $3.5 billion. Its full-year operating margin landed at 22.6%. Its net margin came in at 18.6%. Earnings per share climbed almost 12% year over year to $16.28. Pause on those numbers for a moment. A strong airline in a great year fights to clear a single-digit operating margin. Many of the most famous brands in the sky would be thrilled with 5 or 6%. Copa earns more than 20 cents of operating profit on every single dollar of revenue, and it has done that year after year for most of the last decade. The proof points stack up behind the headline figures. 11 times now, the aviation data firm Cirium has named Copa the most on-time airline in Latin America, including in 2025. On-time performance in the fourth quarter ran at 89%. Flight completion came in at 99.8. The board approved a quarterly dividend of $1.71 per share, paid 4 times a year through 2026. And then came April 28th of 2026. On a stage in Panama City, Heilbronn stood next to the president of Panama and the chief executive of Boeing commercial airplanes and signed for 40 new 737 MAX aircraft, with options for 20 more. The deal is worth roughly $13.5 billion at list prices. With the existing order book, Copa is on track to operate more than 100 737 MAX jets in the years ahead, and a fleet of more than 200 aircraft by 2034. Passenger traffic is projected to climb from around 20.9 million in 2026 to more than 27 million by the end of the decade. A tiny carrier from a country of 4.5 million people is buying enough new aircraft to keep Airbus uncomfortable. The skeptic would still argue that all of this comes back to geography, that Panama just sits in the perfect spot. But geography alone does not explain decades of performance like this. Bogota sits between North and South America, but so does San Jose in Costa Rica, and so does Mexico City. None of them runs a hub anything like Tocumen. Plenty of airlines operate from favorable maps. Almost none achieve Copa's consistency. The difference is discipline. The willingness to keep saying no. No to complexity. No to unnecessary fleet diversity. No to growth that does not make economic sense. No to the temptation of becoming everything to everyone. That said, no strategy is invincible. In fact, the greatest strengths in Copa's story are also its biggest exposures. Start with the obvious one. Boeing. Copa is one of the most committed Boeing customers anywhere on the planet. Every passenger jet it operates is a 737, and its entire forward order book is locked into the 737 MAX family. If Boeing has another deep production crisis or another safety event that grounds the MAX again, Copa has no plan B. There is no Airbus side of the house to lean on, no wide-body fleet to redeploy. The bet on a single airframe is total. Then there is Tocumen itself. The hub of the Americas only works as long as the airport has the runway, the gates, and the terminal capacity to keep growing. Copa's plans assume an airport that can handle well over 100 MAX jets banking through it in waves. If that infrastructure falls behind, every other piece of the strategy slows down with it. The wider region is a constant variable. Latin America has been a graveyard for airlines for a reason. Currencies swing hard. The Brazilian real moved enough in 2025 to push a $6 million foreign currency loss into Copa's fourth quarter accounts. Avianca and Aeromexico are out of bankruptcy and rebuilding. LATAM is bigger than ever, plugging back into long haul. Low-cost carriers like Volaris and Viva keep pressing on price. The competitive set is heating up, and politics is never far away. Copa is the flag carrier of a country whose hub status depends on staying neutral, open, and friendly to every other government in the Americas. The day that gets harder, the model gets harder with it. The bet, though, is still pointing the same way. 40 more MAX jets ordered in 2026, options for 20 more on top, a plan for more than 100 MAX aircraft, a balance sheet built for shocks, the same disciplined playbook run by the same small group of people in the same small country for the next decade. For decades, aviation has operated on a simple assumption: bigger is safer. More routes, more countries, more aircraft types, more markets, more everything. Copa built one of the most successful airlines on the planet by believing the exact opposite. Fewer moving parts, fewer complications, more focus, more discipline. And year after year, that approach keeps outperforming carriers that are far larger and far more famous. So here is the question worth chewing on. Is Copa proof that the rest of the airline industry has spent decades confusing size with strength? Or is it a one-off success story that only works because Panama happens to sit in exactly the right spot on the map and nobody else can copy it? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to read what you think. And if you enjoyed this video, do me a quick favor and hit the like button and subscribe to Explain if you have not already. It is the single biggest thing that helps me and my channel grow, and it is completely free. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.